Sometime in the last year, someone you know lost someone they loved, and without thinking, you did a set of things. You showed up, you said certain words, you wore certain clothes, you stood in a specific place at a specific time, and followed a script nobody handed you but everyone somehow knew. Every single part of that script is ancient, far older than religion, far older than language as we know it, and some of it traces back to a moment in a cave, roughly 100,000 years ago, when a human being looked at a body and did something no other animal on Earth had ever done. They didn't know what to do either, but they did something anyway. For most of animal life on Earth, death is simple. A body stops working. Other animals avoid it or eat it or walk past it. Elephants are the closest exception. They linger near their dead, touch the bones with their trunks, sometimes return to the same spot for years. But they don't bury, they don't mark, they don't send anything forward. Only one animal decided that death required a response. The oldest evidence we have comes from a cave in South Africa called Border Cave. Inside, archaeologists found the remains of an infant, buried deliberately, roughly 74,000 years ago. The body had been placed in a small pit. Next to it, a perforated shell, the kind worn as a bead, as jewelry, as something personal. Someone had put it there on purpose, a parent almost certainly, burying a child with the only beautiful thing they owned. That detail sits in you for a moment if you let it, but Border Cave is not even close to the oldest site. In Spain, at the bottom of a 43-foot vertical shaft called La Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, archaeologists found the remains of at least 28 individuals. Homo heidelbergensis, 500,000 years old. There are no signs of habitation in the cave, no tools, no food, no fire, just the dead, carried to the bottom of an almost unreachable pit and left there deliberately. We don't know why. We don't know what they believed. We only know that someone decided these bodies needed to go somewhere specific, that leaving them where they fell was not enough. That impulse, the feeling that a body cannot simply be abandoned, appears to be one of the oldest things about us. But burial wasn't the first response. It couldn't have been. For hundreds of thousands of years before our ancestors started placing bodies in the ground, they had to do something else. And the archaeological record of that something else is deeply strange. The earliest human sites show evidence of defleshing, bones with cut marks in patterns that don't match butchery for food. The marks are careful, deliberate, placed in ways consistent with the removal of flesh as a ritual act rather than a meal. Some researchers believe early humans may have excarnated their dead, removed the flesh from the bones intentionally, then kept the bones, treated the skeleton as something worth preserving. In several sites across Europe, skulls show evidence of being carefully modified after death, edges smoothed, bases removed. The same caves that show these modified skulls also contain red ochre, iron-rich pigment that early humans ground into powder and used to paint, on cave walls, on their bodies, and on the bones of their dead. They were coloring the bones of people they had lost. Ochre burials appear across the world, across tens of thousands of years of human prehistory. In graves in Australia, in Africa, in Europe. The color red, chosen again and again, in cultures that had no contact with each other. Some researchers think red was chosen because it was the color of blood, of life, a way of giving something back to a body that had lost it. We cannot know what they believed, but we know they believed something. Here is what the science suggests about why. Grief is not a cultural invention, it is biological. Studies of hunter-gatherer groups alive today show that the death of a community member triggers a specific and consistent response, a period of reduced activity, increased social contact, shared food, and prolonged conversation about the person who died. The Hadza sit with their dead, they talk about them, they don't move on quickly. This behavior has a function. In a group of 25 people, every single member is load-bearing. A hunter who dies takes irreplaceable knowledge with him. A grandmother who dies takes decades of foraging expertise. Grief, researchers now believe, evolved in part as a mechanism for forcing the group to stop, reckon with the loss, redistribute the weight, and rebuild. The ritual wasn't just for the dead. It was for the living who had to keep going without them. But what happened when there was almost no one left to grieve? In the archaeological record, there are burials that tell a particular kind of story. A single individual, placed carefully, ochre on the bones, a grave good or two. But no sign of a larger camp nearby. No evidence of other burials in the same area. Just one person, buried alone, by hands that left no other trace. Someone survived long enough to bury the last person they knew, then walked away. We will never know where they went. We only know they stopped. They dug, they placed, they covered. Even then, even alone, the response was the same. Thousands of years passed. Burial practices grew more elaborate. Grave goods multiplied. Tools, food, animals, ornaments. Some graves suggest the buried person held a specific role in the community. A healer, a leader, someone whose status followed them into the ground. The first evidence of what we might call a funeral, a structured communal event around death, appears around 30,000 years ago. Bodies arranged with care, red ochre, ivory beads sewn into clothing, mammoth bones placed as markers above the grave. The ceremony was already recognizable, already, somehow, familiar. Because the thing underneath all of it, the impulse that sent someone down a 43-foot shaft with a body, that placed a shell beside a buried infant, that ground red pigment into the bones of the lost, was not a belief system. It was not a religion. It was not a tradition handed down through language. It was the refusal to let a person become nothing. That refusal is still in you. You feel it at funerals you don't want to attend, for people you barely knew. You feel it when you can't throw away a dead person's belongings. You feel it when a name comes up years later and the room gets quiet for a moment before the conversation moves on. Your ancestors felt it in the dark of a cave, with no words for what they were doing and no guarantee that it meant anything at all. They did it anyway. Next time, I want to look at what happened after the burial was over, how ancient humans handled the grief itself, and what the Hadza can tell us about mourning in a world without therapists, without time off, and without the option of being alone. I'll leave that one linked.